Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Manook. I'm truly excited to be your host for today's Design Matters webinar featuring our guest presenter, FileMaker developer Jordan Watson, who you may have seen present on FileMaker Design at a past FileMaker Developers Conference. In the next 45 minutes, Jordan will reveal his tips for focusing on value and delighting customers with excellent design. But before we get started, I have some brief housekeeping notes. So for the best experience, we strongly recommend that you participate in this webinar with at least a broadband connection. So if you have any problems or require online assistance at any time, please contact Citrix Technical Support at 888-259-8414. Again, that number is 888-259-8414. Now, during today's presentation, you're going to have the opportunity to type in and ask questions. So let's talk briefly about how to do that. Just go to the control panel, click on that question section, enter your question, and click on send. And we'll try to cover as many questions as time allows at the end of our presentation, but remember, you don't have to wait until then to submit a question. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Jordan Watson.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, so we'll get started. The title of the talk is called Design Matters, but does it really? It seems foreign to me now, but when I started developing FileMaker apps about 7 years ago, design wasn't even in my thought process. I was solely focused, and quite rightly so, on ensuring the structure was correct and my app was functional. It took me almost 18 months to realize, wait, someone actually has to use this screen that I'm building. What was the problem with that? Well, to be honest, at that time, there wasn't much of a problem. I was working for a small organization where all users were sat in the same office and answering the questions of, Jordan, how do I do this? Or what does this icon mean? Or I'm stuck, can you help? All those questions were easy to answer. The problem arose when I wasn't in the same office as those users, and I had multiple apps to manage. No longer did I have the time to answer those sorts of questions. But when users can't work out how to perform actions, they inevitably move away from the system that was specifically provided to make their lives easier. So I started to think, how can I make apps which don't rely on users having an in-depth knowledge of the screens or business process, in fact, in order to gain benefits? So I started to look at other tools which are used in mass in order to see how they do it. And I picked 5. I started to have a look at Google, Facebook, started to download more apps from the App Store. I had a look at Instagram and YouTube. And some of the numbers that I saw were absolutely astonishing. Google processes 3.5 billion searches a day. That's almost half the world's population in searches. Facebook, as half of people with internet access, subscribe to its tool. Yet none of these users have to go through detailed training, nor is there really a mass amount of support centers to give them advice on how to use these tools. If you take YouTube, for example, it's physically impossible to watch all the videos on YouTube. That's because people upload around 100 hours worth of video every minute. So by the time you finish one video, there'd be 1,000 more added to that website. Whether we like it or not, these apps have raised the minimal level of user expectation when it comes to design. These huge companies have spent billions to ensure they lead the way. That led me to start to question, as a FileMaker developer, can I achieve this level of experience? So actually, before we get onto the meaty stuff, I thought I'd just give you a bit of background about myself. If you haven't been able to tell by the accent, I'm from England, based out from London. I mean, usually people have worked that out from the crooked and yellow teeth, but seeing as it's a webinar, you'll just have to put with the accent alone. I've been developing FileMaker for about 7 years now. I originally didn't come into the world of development wanting to be a developer. I had a business problem to solve. I was an intern and I started to pick up FileMaker purely to solve a business problem. So I've seen FileMaker from almost every angle there is to see of being a FileMaker developer, or in fact in the FileMaker world. I was a self-taught internal developer for 18 months. I then went and worked for FileMaker at the European head office as a sales executive. I then jumped out of being a sales exec and moved into the world of consultancy, where I worked for Winod Data based out in London for 4 years. And now I'm in charge of a consultancy firm, again, delivering apps to end users. Through these 7 years of developing, I've designed and built custom applications for some fantastic companies. Think people like Rolls-Royce, Apple, Team GB, and Humming have delivered applications for Apple, FileMaker, NHS, investment funds, and local government. So that's enough about me, before you all get too bored. So like with any talk that I do on design, I like to try and put my money where my mouth is, which some of you may see as brave, but I like to try and show you some of the work, some of the design work that we've done. Because in all honesty, the rest of the talk is based off how we design applications. So if you don't like the screens that come next, to be totally honest, you're probably not going to like the rest of the content in the talk either. But let's go ahead and crack on. So most of you may just be signed up to the talk to gain access to a copy of the BeatLord file. And this is a sneak preview of the iPhone versions of the BeatLord app. Again, you won't get a copy until the end of the talk. So if you want to receive that copy, unfortunately, you're going to have to put up with about 30 minutes of me talking beforehand. But as you can see, the BeatLord app was designed to work predominantly on iPhone and iPad. And it takes the UI from the newest iOS 11 guidelines, along with trying to make it fit with the design for the iPhone X as well. And again, this is the desktop version of BeatLord, which you will gain access to at the end of this webinar. For those of you who have been developing in FileMaker for a while, you'll clearly see that this design is based off the Invoices Starter solution. And we made this design decision on purpose. What we wanted to show is for anybody new to the platform that actually you can totally transform the starter solutions that are given to you. You can make them your own and you can rebrand them. The next design is a CRM solution, very simple. And actually I'm going to, if we have time, run through some of the design decisions that we took with this on a recent project. But again, it's supposed to be a simple CRM system, which also includes an iPhone version as well. Like with everything, people want data on the go, and our request to produce more iPhone versions of apps is becoming more frequent and more frequent. And because everybody loves to see their stats, here is an example of a dashboard that we produced for a large construction company as well. So if everybody's still here, we haven't had too many drop-offs, I'll crack on with the rest of the talk. So why design matters? For a long time, I've worked with or taken over projects where stakeholders have made the assertion that design doesn't really matter. It's an add-on, a bonus, almost a luxury for the few clients with large budgets. It's far more important to spend the client's budget on getting that functional rather than making it look nice. But I fundamentally disagree with that principle. Let me show you a recent project. This is a CRM system which was produced by an internal member of staff. And they picked up FileMaker and they actually built a system in 2 days with absolutely no experience. And this CRM did a job. And it did its job for years, actually. But we were brought in to look at this system. And when we looked at it and we looked at the features, we actually saw that about 80% of what you would require from a CRM is built somewhere in this file. But when we surveyed users to see how they felt toward this system, 73% of users said they find themselves using another system or another app to help them in their business process. Only 30% of users said the current system improved their ability to convert a lead to a sale. So only 30% of users said this system was actually benefiting them. So again, we took that principle and we redesigned the application. The majority of the work was actually done on the experience side. We added about 10% more extra functionality, and we did rebuild the functionality that was there. But the reality is that most of the effort went into redesigning the front end. And we resubmitted the same survey to the same set of users. And what we found is Now, only 30% of users said they found themselves using other systems to help secure a sale. So that's now a massive 40% swing. So we moved from 70% of users moving away from the system to only 30%. 80% of users said the current system improves their ability to convert a lead to a sale. Again, that's a staggering 50% swing to people wanting to use the system and find a benefit. But can simply changing a screen design really have helped that much? Well, I think design can be fundamental to the long-term adoption of a custom app. This is because as humans, we have a strange quirk in our psychology. We feel, and in a sense, are different people depending on what is placed in front of our eyes. For example, a dark, broody sky will make you feel a certain way, whereas the bright blue sky will make you feel a totally different way. This type of bedroom will make you feel one way, and this another. Design is important because it fundamentally changes the way we feel about something. Again, in my opinion, it can be the real difference between the long-term adoption or rejection of a custom app. An app is much more than just a group of layouts connected by scripts. It's an interface, a space where different things, in this case, a person and a business process meet. That interaction creates an experience for the user. And as a developer, it's our job to ensure that experience is as good as it can possibly be. But what are the constituent parts of a great experience? User experience design is the process of designing digital or physical products that are useful, easy to use, and delightful to interact with. It has many dimensions, and it includes a bunch of different disciplines such as interaction design, information architecture, visual design, usability, human-computer interaction, graphic elements, typography, navigation, structure. But let me try and make a clearer picture for you of what that really means. At its more simple form, UX can be broken down into three key areas. Usability. That is the extent to which an app can be used by specified users to achieve specified goals with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. The next area is business goals. How well does the app behave in accordance to the functional requirements? Now, this doesn't take into account actually any design principles. This is all about, does the app achieve the objectives that you originally set out for it to achieve? And finally, user interface design. This is all about the aesthetics. It's about the aesthetic appeal of the design. It's about color, it's about font, it's about placement. The culmination of all these three ends up in having a great user experience. Now, I previously did a talk at DevCon in 2016, which I'm sure you'll be able to find on YouTube, called Usability versus User Experience. That talk breaks these sections down into more detail and explains the importance of finding the right balance between all three. As you can see from the previous slides, designing an app for a great experience can be complex. So I've tried to put together some key principles which we find important to focus on and will hopefully set you in the right direction when starting to design your apps. Just to forewarn you though, this is not going to be a holy grail to good UX, but hopefully it should point you in the right direction. And to be totally honest, sometimes I look at the UX that we produce and I think we've got it absolutely spot on. And other times I look at it and think we've slightly missed the mark. But in all honesty, that's the world of custom development that the majority of us have bought into and love. So what's number one? Above all else, you have to know your users and their world. It means knowing what they need and what stands in the way of them achieving their goals. Don't just stop at knowing your users' wants. Dig a little bit deeper. Find out what they need. If you can address a user's deep-seated need, you'll address their wants, whilst also fulfilling some more fundamental requirements. In order to understand your user's world, you need to get in your user's shoes. And more often than not, Their shoes are not in your office. The only way to understand the user is to get into their world and out of your office. Begin by visiting the place where people will use your app, whether that be at their home, work, or on the road with them. This can be invaluable and save you a lot of work further down the line. On a recent project, we were delivering an app that allowed underwriters the ability to perform updates whilst on site. The app was designed to work on iPads, so the underwriter could complete the form whilst taking pictures, whilst walking around site. The design and the app were fully signed off, and everyone was extremely happy. But when we performed a site visit with the underwriter, I started to question to him, well, where's your iPad? And he informed me that it was in his rucksack. So I started to question, well, hold on, how are you going to complete this form? And how are you going to take pictures? And he said, oh, I've got an iPhone in my pocket that I take photos on. And the form actually gets completed on the train on the way back to the office. This resulted in us going back to the drawing board in order to curate a new solution that required us to rebuild some iPhone screens at our cost. How did we get into that scenario? Well, situations like that arise because designs and apps are almost exclusively reviewed in quiet meeting rooms, where all stakeholders give design their full attention. People rarely use software in such a calm setting. I've been on site with clients, and my apps are used in environments more like this. Your apps need to work in disruptive, ever-changing environments. Next time you're in a client, or even the next time you're in your own office, just take a few minutes, sit back, and see how many times people are distracted from their task because of someone else's conversation. Watching users is fantastic. Even with minimal planning, you can learn a lot from observing them. The insights you'll uncover from observing and speaking to users will inform every decision you make, from how people use your interface to what types of content you'll highlight within that interface. So moving on to number 2. Anticipate mistakes. The ultimate goal for any app is never to have errors. But developers are human and computer systems are far from perfect, so errors will occur. An error-tolerant app should be designed to prevent errors caused by the user's interaction and to help the user in recovering from any errors that do occur. As much as sometimes I wish it could be, replacing user is not the answer. People make mistakes, but they shouldn't always have to suffer the consequences. There are 2 ways to help lessen the impact of user error. Number 1, let's just try and prevent the mistakes before they even happen. You see a lot of mistake prevention techniques in e-commerce and form design. For example, buttons remain inactive until you fill out all fields, forms detect that an email address hasn't been entered properly, those annoying pop-ups ask you, do you really want to abandon your cart? Or, in fact, oh, be careful, you're about to delete all records. Here are a few examples of streamlining form design to enable us to try and prevent mistakes. If you haven't done so already, take a look at Designing Better Forms by Andrew Cole on the UX Collective channel on Medium. All these examples are taken directly from there. Where possible, keep all fields in forms vertically stacked. The reason for this is multiple columns actually disrupt a user's vertical momentum when completing a form. Now, what I should say is that if you've got a fairly simple form with a limited number of fields, the aim has to be to put them vertically. Now, sometimes that can't always be the case. It's all context specific. Sometimes you might have to make multiple columns, but just be aware that there is a cost to the user of having those multiple columns. The next one is make call to action buttons descriptive. A call to action button should state the intent of when it's clicked. So again, on the right hand side, if you can see, we've got a blue button which has got the label of submit. To me as a user, that is, I'm just posting my information, almost I'm submitting it to a system. Whereas on the left hand side, we can clearly see that actually, I'm about to sign up to something. Those 2 buttons which look exactly the same, but with a change of word, now take on a whole different meaning. Specify errors in line. Show the user where the error occurred and provide a reason for that error. Again, on the right-hand side, we've given the user information that at least they have an error, or we found an error. But as a user, I'm left wondering, well, where is the error? Is it the fact that my email address is wrong? Or is it because I've missed a password? Whereas on the left-hand side, show where that user error is and clearly state why the error has occurred. I don't know whether you can also see as well, on the right-hand side form, we're letting the user continually hit that submit button. Whereas on the left-hand form, we're actually graying out the sign up whilst errors occur, so we don't let the user try and submit a form with errors. Next one is don't hide basic helper text. Expose helper text wherever possible. Now, for more complex error text, so for example, anything more than a sentence, maybe even a paragraph, I would suggest putting that on screen or it being highlighted when the user is in focus on a field. So when the user clicks in that field, that helper text appears. The reason for having helper text always on screen is all about this momentum of getting people to complete forms and to try and prevent mistakes. If I'm completing a form on the left-hand side, I can clearly see that the password needs 5 or more characters. It needs no more mental effort from me. It's just presented there in front of my screen. Whereas on the right-hand side, it would rely on me understanding, first of all, what the question icon means. Secondly, it relies on me taking a bit of effort, taking my hands off the keyboard to the mouse in order to click it. Next, differentiate primary from secondary actions. So on the right-hand side, we can see that the 2 buttons are styled exactly the same way. This means as a user, I need to read both of them and process both sets of information in order to make an informed decision about which ones to press. And as a designer, we're not actually pushing the user to click one over the other. Whereas on the left-hand side, straight away the user's eye is drawn to the button that we're looking for them to select. And finally, use field length as an affordance. The length of the field for the length of the answer. Use this for fields that have a defined character count, like zip codes or telephone numbers. Bringing all that together makes simple forms which should aim to prevent users from making errors. Anticipating mistakes is often far less frustrating for users than trying to fix them after the fact. That's because they occur before that satisfying sense of completion that comes with a user clicking on that next or submit button. With all that being said though, sometimes you just have to let mistakes happen. That's when detailed error messages really come into their own. When you're writing error messages, make sure they do 2 things. Number 1, make sure they explain the problem. For example, you said you were born on Mars, which Elon Musk hasn't colonized yet. Number 2, explain how to fix the problem. For example, please enter a birthplace here on Earth. This will obviously take more development, but you will only need to do the development once. It's a lot easier doing the development once than it is answering the same set of tickets and questions over and over and over again. So again, let's have a look at this example. On the left-hand side, we've got the simple error messages, please enter your email. On the right-hand side, we've taken that error message and shown 3 different ways that you could elaborate further. So first of all, the user hasn't submitted any value at all. So a simple error message of please enter a value would suffice. Secondly, the user's entered their name, but they've missed the domain from the email. Again, it's more development, but it's in the realms of capability for FileMaker to work out that what's missing from this email is the domain address. And finally, the user's put the domain in, but now they've taken away the @ symbol. So again, can we help them out? Can we work out that the email address must contain a simple @ symbol and tell them? As well as reducing the amount of tickets that we have to deal with, it will also speed up the process for the user. And if that means this is one less thing for the user to get frustrated about, then that must be better for them, you, and the business. You can also use that technique of disclosing more information for non-error situations as well. So for instance, if I'm going to delete something, you can always add another line of text in to let the user know that this action cannot be undone. When it comes to error-tolerant programming, always see developing as putting bugs into a perfectly working empty file. Okay, number 3, give feedback. In the real world, the environment gives us feedback. We speak and others respond. Well, they usually do anyway. Feedback provides comfort and a sense of security. It tells us we're doing the right thing, and it helps us decide if the outcome of our actions is valuable. If we get clear signals that our investment of time and effort will be worthwhile and will meet our needs and expectations, we'll keep going. When the result of our actions costs us, when the result isn't worth the effort, we learn to avoid doing those things. And in cases of apps designed for repeat use, that feedback increases the likelihood that we'll return to use it again. All too often, digital interfaces fail to give much feedback. They leave us wondering whether or not we should click that button again, restart the laptop, or in some cases, just give up completely. For every action, there should be a reaction. So give users that loading animation or that success bar. Make that button pop and snap back when they tap it, and give them a reaction when they do something awesome. Just make sure it all happens fast. Usability.gov defines any delay over 1 second as an interruption, over 10 seconds a disruption, and 10 seconds as a disruption is very generous. For about half of the US population, 3 seconds is enough to cause a disruption. As a general rule, if a script or layout will load in under 5 seconds, don't display a progress bar, as it'll actually make the loading time seem longer. Instead, use a visualization that doesn't imply progress, like Mac's infamous spinning beach ball of death. Okay, the penultimate one, we're getting there. Keep things simple and consistent. It's only logical that the more simple something is, the easier it is to learn. So whenever possible, limit the number of things a person needs to remember to use your interface efficiently and effectively. The more options you present to a user, the harder it becomes for them to make a decision. And this impacts almost everything that we build. It could be overall layouts, navigation menus, card windows, the list goes on. But the upshot is the simpler we make our designs, the faster it is for users to make the decision that we want them to make. So again, going back to our original screens, on this screen, we've got many buttons. They're exactly the same style. They're all cluttered all around the screen, which means your eye isn't automatically drawn to one button. You almost have to go through methodically each button to work out exactly which one you should be pressing. Whereas on the new design, hopefully you can see the main call to action on this screen. And if not, it is that button there. So again, this is the button that when we did research, most users are going to be looking for when they come to this screen. It is the most frequently used button on screen. So the answer is keep things simple. Just not that simple. I've been guilty before of designing screens that look clean and simple until you try and get a user to use them. What feels simple to one person in one situation may not feel simple to everyone in every situation. A Formula One driver is not going to feel like you've made his life more simple if you ask him to race in a minute. So finally, the final principle before I try and do a bit of a demo or run you through some more screens is look for inspiration. I can spend hours whole mornings to days researching screen designs, color palettes, signing up to multiple websites, registering for trials of other products. We have an ongoing joke in our team, which is that Google and Facebook are our biggest R&D departments. Designing takes time and some experience of what works and what doesn't. So if you're struggling to come up with original designs, my advice would be go seek inspiration from elsewhere. It's not always about coming up with the newest thing. So use tools like Google to do Google searches of app UI or iPad UI. Go on Pinterest. And if you're not familiar, try out Dribble as well. Okay, so I'm cautious that I'm sure people have lots of questions. But I'm going to try and run you through. It's not a demo as such, but it's almost, I want to run you through the decisions that we make when we were transforming the screen that was complex into the simple screen. So hopefully, if I come out of this, oh, there we go. Okay. So I'll try and go this as quickly as possible and cover some main aspects. Again, because I'm sure that everybody's got questions that they want to ask as well. So let's take the screen that we originally started with. And straight away, when we started to analyze this screen from a UX perspective, there were a couple of problems. First of all, everything is based off an orange background. Colored backgrounds can be great, except it is sometimes hard to make things stand out on them. So for example, we have a big red title here, which doesn't really stand out too much. And we have a set of red buttons at the bottom based on a white background. Again, they don't really scream out to us to look there straight away. And as previously mentioned, all the buttons are the same color and the same style, which again is consistent, but it doesn't draw my eye towards them. The biggest obstacle that we came across with redesigning this file is that unfortunately, and again, this is no fault of the original developers, they put this system together in 2 days with no experience. But FileMaker got a bit of a bad rep. Users were actually skeptical for us to deliver them another FileMaker system. So this wasn't one of our key principles, but it's something that we do in all files, and that is we try to give the file its own identity. We try to come up with a logo, a name, and almost a theme for that file, so that it feels like it's something more than what they had previously. So I'm going to dive in straight away. I'm going to open up the new copy of the file, and hopefully straight away you'll start to see a difference. So first of all, there is a loading process to this system. So using one of the principles, we use something to show loading progress. And straight away, we've put the user into a screen that we think they would find useful. Whereas on the old system, this is the first screen that they got taken to straight away. They got taken to the first record of a company. So straight away, the user had to make a decision of, where do I want to go next? The first thing the user had to do was move away from the screen that we put them on. Whereas in the new system, we provided them enough information that would actually inform them what they need to do next on screen. So let me jump into the same account so we can see the differences. So again, you may notice a few differences on this screen from the previous one. First of all, again, let me just quickly go back. On the old system, all fields were enterable on screen. What that led to was a lot of mistakes happening, where users would be in a field and they would delete information, and we'd get tickets through saying, oh, I've accidentally deleted all this information. Can you get it back for us? So on all our new designs of systems, we actually don't have any edit fields on screen at all. The user is presented almost with a display view, a preview view. There's a few reasons for this. Number one is we want the user to make a conscious decision that they should be clicking into an edit mode, that I consciously want to go in and edit some information. So we put everything behind almost an edit wall. So the user has to click on a button in order to gain the screen where we can put information in. This also allows us to make users delete information and make mistakes, but it gives them the ability to cancel those changes. Again, giving them the ability to resolve any errors that may occur. And again, what I will do is in the upcoming weeks, I will publish some more blogs online, which will show you how you can use techniques like this cancel feature in your systems as well. Second reason that we do this edit mode is because we looked at apps on the market, like your Twitters, your Facebooks of the world, and you have to go into a mode in order to edit your information. So actually users are happy to go into the extra click in order to get to that screen. Secondly, I don't know whether you can see, but people may have noticed that some elements on this screen aren't what you would class as native FileMaker functions. So for example, the company's tags in the top left-hand corner, and the way that we've produced the notes section are actually using web viewers. Now, when I first started developing FileMaker, the concept of putting web viewers with web code in a FileMaker system scared me senseless. I would do anything other than try and build custom web code. But there are some benefits to it. We could have achieved a similar level of experience actually just using FileMaker portals like we've done on this left-hand side here. But we chose to elevate the experience because we wanted the size of the notes to change, almost the size of the portal row to change depending on the content which was in it. And we wanted to dynamically show what things relate to this note, depending whether they're there or not. So in order to do that, and again, I will issue blog posts online in order to show you how you can implement this really quickly. It's not a lot of code, actually. The actual web code is only a couple of lines long. And the reason that it is only a couple of lines long is that we use or we rely on a free web framework called Semantic UI, which I've previously got into more details on a previous talk. And Semantic UI has main elements, and one of them is the comments feed. The great thing about Semantic UI and other frameworks is they actually readily give you the code in order to reproduce that. And we have tested almost every single one of these functions in Semantic UI, and copying the code in the CSS, putting them in a FileMaker web viewer does work. I have to forewarn you though, that you have to do some work to make it work on FileMaker Go, and it is not compatible with FileMaker WebDirect. So let me come back to our FileMaker screen. Let me close that down. Again, cautious of time, I'll run through one more thing that we like to do as well. In fact, quickly before I get to that, I want to talk about something that we mentioned about keeping things simple and consistent. On every list view that we have on screen, hopefully you can see that every list view more or less takes the same format. And that's because we want to make sure that our screens are consistent, that users know that the add button on the list view is always going to be in that top right-hand corner. But what we noticed is that when we started this consistency, users sometimes got confused as to what list they were actually on, and they ended up adding a new user instead of adding a new account. So what we started to do is we started to ensure that each section of the system had its own icon and its own color. And we display that on screen next to the title. So users are aware of what section of the system they're in, as well as highlighting this top navigational bar. So the one last tip from me would be when developing using this edit mode, when you load a record up, if there's no related information, the screens can become very stark and blank, and it can almost be scary to users to come into an empty screen. So just with FileMaker, I believe it was FileMaker 14 and 15, the introduction of placeholders for fields, we also put placeholders in for portals. So the user is never presented with a blank screen, and we also try and add a bit of character into the screens as well. So we put an icon, a bit of text, and we put the button which allows people to add new information in there as well. Excellent. Hopefully, that should leave us enough time for some questions, if I can get Keynote back up. There we go. So Ryan, have we had any questions come through?
We did. So again, if you haven't answered a question yet, go to webinar control panel, click on the question section, enter your question, and click on send. And before we do that, Jordan, thanks for that very, very informative webinar. Fantastic information. So thanks for sharing your knowledge with us. To start off, the first question that we have, you were talking about the balance of usability, design, and performance, and sometimes clients take hard stands on changes that they want that severely compromises UX balance. How do you typically address that?
A tough one. There's the old saying which the client is always right, which is wrong. It has to be a discussion with the client. Usually people ask for things and they don't ask for things, they almost demand things because they're giving a solution to a problem. Whereas I've always found if you try to understand what the problem is in the first place, perhaps you can tell them a different solution, which you know isn't going to impact that end result. But sometimes though, unfortunately, you just got to take the bad with the good. Sometimes it is a case of doing exactly what they say. If you've knocked on that door a million times and you're getting nowhere, sometimes it is a case of doing what they say, but showing how an alternative method somewhere else in the system has led to different results. Or in fact, go and speak to the end user and get the suggestion of what would be better and present that back to the stakeholder as an option.
Perfect. The next question, at what point in the development process do you feel design needs our attention? I tend to start out with functionality and workflow, and at the end of my process, start cleaning up design.
Yeah, great question. It would be after you've collected the functional requirements. And there is a discussion, and we have this battle almost on a daily basis of what should come first. I'm very cautious of letting design lead somebody's requirements. I think that can be dangerous. So I would suggest try and get the functional requirements first, but get a very high level view of those requirements, and then almost build wireframes or give some substance to those requirements, which allow you to you and the stakeholder to elaborate further. I always find that the sooner you can put a screen in front of a user, whether that be the stakeholder or the end user, you'll get to the right requirement faster. But I definitely think get high level requirements first, don't do design first, then put that in front of the user and the stakeholder, and then start to iterate over that design.
All right, the next question. What's your take on using starter solutions that ship with FileMaker or are offered as downloads by FileMaker developers?
I highly rate starter solutions, but I only rate them as what they are, starter solutions. When I was self-taught, I started building systems with the starter solutions, and I downloaded them, and they taught me a heck of a lot about FileMaker. I loved unpicking the bits of scripts and working out how it was doing it. But just be cautious that if you start building off a FileMaker starter solution, at least, you will get to a point where you may have to go back and start again. But hopefully, once you get to that point, you've hopefully had a big enough return on investment that going back to the beginning and starting again seems worthwhile, as you've made the mistakes in that environment. But yeah, definitely, if you're new to the platform, definitely start with starter solutions, even if it's nothing else but an educational platform.
Perfect. So Jordan, do you use or do you or your team use graphic designers or artists to help, or does one person do design plus coding?
The answer is no, we don't use graphic designers to design. We have thought about it, in all honesty, but we thought that actually they would need to be brought into the process of understanding the requirements and being brought into the users, that we actually thought it would be too big of an outlay for us. We're very fortunate actually that we have a set of developers who absolutely love design. But again, I would think there is enough software products on the market now where you can take inspiration from things that other people have done. whether that be, again, the big guys like your Googles or your Facebooks, or whether that just be smaller platforms that you stumble across online.
Excellent. And the next question, do you have any best practice tips for using placeholder text for fields?
Yeah, another great question. I would think the way I always look at placeholders is that they have to be giving something extra to a user. I would never use placeholders instead of field labels, only because I think it looks really nice, but actually once the information's filled out, other than an address, it can sometimes get confusing of what that information is. In terms of almost, I'm trying to think of any rule or such that I would say. What I tend to say with placeholders actually is that it's great to give examples of the data that should be entered. For example, an email address using like example@sample.com as a placeholder gives the user the indication of how much information or what type of information you're looking from. But again, yeah, definitely wouldn't use that instead of field labels. And as long as it's adding something extra to the screen, then definitely put it in there.
Perfect. Another question about the way you're choosing your color palettes. Do you routinely check for red-green color blindness, and how do you deal with it in your color palette for buttons, icons, etc.?
Yeah, great questions. I haven't, is the honest answer. Again, to be totally honest and transparent, I've never come across that problem, so I've never had to actually cater for it. With that question in mind, though, if we were to get a user with that specific need, we may have some problems with our color palettes. So again, yes, I think I would look at that problem if I was to come across it, but I haven't come across it thus far.
Okay. You had mentioned that you'll be posting a few blogs. Can you share where the users can sign up for your blogs on design?
Yes, all the blogs will go through FileMaker's Medium page. So if you don't do already, I would highly recommend signing up to FileMaker's Medium page. The plethora of information which gets submitted by the community in there is invaluable, regardless of any level that you are with FileMaker. And I believe Eric has kindly shared that link as well in the chat in the webinar. So yeah, definitely sign up to all and any articles will go into in the design section.
Excellent. And that's all the time we have for questions today. Jordan, I believe you have some next step slide.
I do indeed. Let me see. Oh, there we go.
So for the next steps, you can download the BeatLord app. We'll send a link after this session. If you want to contact Jordan, go to jordan.watson@hummingtech.net if you have any further questions. And again, for additional information and different additional tools that can help you with building and designing in FileMaker, go to FileMaker.com/learning section. So that's all the time we have for today. On behalf of Jordan, on behalf of FileMaker, it was our absolute pleasure chatting with everyone today. I definitely hope you learned something that you can take into your own custom apps, and we definitely hope to see you on another webinar soon. Have a fantastic rest of your day, everyone.